Hello and welcome to the Politics Club podcast. I am one of your hosts, Lincoln Anavali.
And I am Lincoln's friend and co-host, Connor Flynn.
So today we're going to be talking about a couple things, primarily the Trump Mar-a-Lago search, and then Cheney's loss in Wyoming this week, and also some of what we're looking forward to in 2024 and heading forward into the midterms.
Yeah, so I heard that there was a little raid at a certain house in Florida. So I'm sure you folks have heard Trump's home in Florida was raided, this was a week and a half ago-ish, by the FBI in search of government documents that they believe Trump had at his home and had there in secret, basically against the law. This has ignited, of course, a firestorm across the country, especially on the right, where people are suggesting that this raid was somehow illegal. I think by now we've all heard the stories and seen the Fox News headlines, and it's important that we get the record straight, that this raid was something that was given authorization by a judge, an independent federal judge, and done by the FBI, who, by the way, Trump appointed its head at the start of his term in office. So it's certainly a fascinating time, again, to see something like this so unprecedented. And yes, this is very unprecedented. And I sort of want to get your take on why you think folks, again, have basically decided to go down the road of this is a witch hunt, and not pretty much objectively look at the facts of the situation, which is that it seems right now he had very top secret government documents involving, our security at his home in Florida.
Yeah, I mean, it's, the Republicans and especially, the Trump fandom are kind of doing the same thing that they've always done whenever there is any kind of investigation or accusations of criminality against Trump. They're just playing the same defense that they've always played in terms of just saying it's a conspiracy, it's a witch hunt. I would say this is probably the least, this is the most solid case that has actually been brought against Trump so far, I would say, in terms of legality and actual risk for him to face prosecution. But, there's, I think, kind of a nuanced conversation that has to be had here about kind of what happened and the precedent that it broke and what it sets going forward. This is the first time that really the FBI's raided a president's home, former president's home. And I think that's if criminality was found, which it seems like it was, then that's a good thing for a healthy, justice driven society to have. Whether it be Republicans, or one of their defensive strategies is to bring up other politicians on the other side who have done some not very good things. Hillary Clinton, of course, for one example. Hunter Biden for another. And when the Republicans say that, they're just using that as a tactic to kind of defend themselves. But there is some merit there when these politicians commit crimes and they aren't held responsible for them, where if they were in any other position, they would have been charged with that. And of course, there was the investigation against Hillary Clinton, but nothing came of that. In the end, despite her committing serious crimes. But, at the end of the day, what those past actions shouldn't determine how we treat a politician going forward.
And I find it strange at this point, but not surprising, that a group of people who for such a long time have said that they place rule of law above all else seems to, especially in the last couple of years, sort of ignored that part of their party and have basically said rule of law for thee but not for me. I think that especially in this case with Trump, it's just one more thing after the next, where you have a group of his supporters and also people in Congress who don't really like the guy at all, but realize that they need each other in order to succeed, right? The Republicans in Congress, I'm sure you've all seen reports that they, smack talk Trump behind his back, but they understand that they need the guy in order to win votes. And it's just that simple. So I think that for folks who believe that this raid on Trump's house, raid if you can even call it that, is somehow unprecedented, it is. It totally is, and I agree with them that it is unprecedented. But you also have to think about why it's unprecedented. I mean, no president has ever had the codes for our nuclear system at his golf course. I mean, this is a unprecedented man who had an unprecedented presidency.
Yeah, I think on the one hand, Republicans in Congress, a lot of them are kind of talking a big game about, defunding the FBI and destroying the FBI. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of them are actually in support of this investigation. They want to get Trump out of the picture because the only way that Republicans are sure to lose in 24 will be if Trump is the nominee. There's just a very slim chance that he'll actually be able to garner that independent vote that he won a lot of in 2016 and in 2020, despite him losing the election. But after January 6th, that entire group that was kind of on the fence or leaning towards Trump, they left that base, and they might not vote for a Democrat, but they definitely will not be voting for Trump.
And I find it fascinating that you have seen the entire right, and I shouldn't say the entire, but a lot of people on the right, sort of infuriated and up in arms about this. But one person has stayed very silent, Ron DeSantis. I haven't heard him say a word about this raid. He's stayed very quiet on this. Ron DeSantis, of course, the conservative governor of Florida, who a lot of people in the Republican Party want to run for president in 2024 against Biden or whoever the nominee is. And I honestly think that if he ran, he would have a very good chance. He's exactly like Trump, except way smarter. And I think he knows what he's doing by staying silent and sort of out of this fray of investigation where, I shouldn't even say he's mainstream because he's not, but he subscribes to a more, mainstream view that having the FBI investigate someone is not inherently bad. And is not inherently some sort of sneaky deep state thing. And he has stayed very quiet on this issue, and I suspect that he will long into the future until Trump, because at some point it's got to break.
Yeah.
Right? So,
well, that's kind of where the nuance has to happen, is because on the one hand, of course, from a principled perspective, looking at this through the lens of justice, Trump should be held accountable for his legal actions. He should be charged. He should be indicted. But looking at it through the political lens, if that were to happen and he were, one of the possible punishments is he's excluded from running for office. If that were to happen, then the Democrats would likely face Ron DeSantis, which is not something that they should want to look forward to. So on the one hand, if you were a Democrat, you would not want to see Trump actually face the punishment for his crimes.
Right.
But if you're looking at this, of course, through kind of principle, you would have to, of course, support the justice system. But it opens up so many questions about DeSantis and would he actually be able to face Trump in a primary situation? And you saw Don Jr. This past week kind of talking bad about DeSantis, saying he is going to take money from donors that Trump won't, and he won't be swayed by the dark money politicians. But at the end of the day, they're both subscribing to the same ideology. It's just how it's going to be packaged.
Right. And speaking on behalf of myself, and I'm sure a lot of other voters who vote for Democrats, is that I would love to see Trump brought to justice, no matter what that means in 24, right? Because I think, and the vast majority of people in our country, I believe that rule of law supersedes all. And, if that means that Biden has to face a younger, fresher Ron DeSantis than Trump, so be it. But I think that's a conversation that we have down the road. Right now, it's so important that we figure out what Trump was doing in his final days as president, especially on January 6th, and why exactly he had these top secret government documents at his home in Florida. And yes, it's unprecedented, as I said earlier, but he is an unprecedented man.
Yeah,
so
I think I'm not sure we've narrowed down why he would take these documents. Of course, maybe he just thought he genuinely was still president and, still had power to have these documents. And, the FBI, sure, they raided his house, but they treated him lightly for the past many months, requesting the documents, and if you're a Republican, you should see that and say, well, Trump was kind of given special treatment. If you imagine this being like a, assistant deputy in the State Department taking these documents, that person would be in prison right now, possibly facing execution.
If it's you, me, or any other average American,
right,
they would have been, far and away locked up a long time ago.
And rightfully so.
Right.
But, we have to treat everyone equally in the justice system, whether that be Republican or Democrat.
Right.
In this
and
case,
something else in your point, though, Lincoln, is that for at least a year and a half now, you've heard folks on the left saying that the Justice Department is weak and is too weak, and that we need to go after Trump harder. And basically, I think that what they're doing is smart, right? It's behind closed doors. I get that feeds theories about deep state, Hillary Clinton, whatever it is. But I think the fact that they've been very cautious in operating, and that because of what we've seen in the last year and a half, being so cautious, respectfully asking for things, the fact that they decided to raid his house means that they know something was there that was not supposed to be there. It just flip on the channel to MSNBC and hear for almost every night for the last year and a half just all this list of complaints about the Justice Department not moving fast enough. And yet here we are a few months before the midterms, and this huge piece of news drops on the Justice Department moving very fast.
Yeah. In terms of the deep state, it's if there is like this quote unquote deep state, it's certainly not leftist or leaning to the left, because the FBI and the CIA and all of these intelligence agencies, they've used their tools to go after leftists for their entire existence. So, for conservatives to actually claim that they're the victims of this, deep state is just absolutely ridiculous on every level. And sure, we have to be careful when we are dealing with political opponents and the Justice Department. That is definitely something that should be considered. And another thing that should be considered is the appearance that this makes. This is going to have a bad effect on conservatives' trust in another institution of the government, and that will, just decay more away at our civil society that we are losing. Including elections, of course, has been, the biggest thing that's been chipped away at. So there's a lot of different considerations that need to be made. But at the end of the day, I think you have to make the right decision going for justice.
Right. And thinking about this through the lens of winning and losing strictly, Trump wins when he's the victim. He wins when he can say, I am the victim, and I'm fighting for people like you against these shady people. And that's how he won in 2016 and shocked the world without a doubt, if you liked him or not. It was a huge, huge upset. And he won that race because he portrayed himself and all the people he represents as victims of this, our own civil society that we all should fight to uphold. He sort of flipped that on its head. And I think this raid, as you said, feeds more in to what he's been saying for the last 7 years, that, he's a victim and these people are out to get me. and here's one more piece of proof that I can use to say that, our whole system of government is corrupt and out to stop my changes, which really are like bad and strictly authoritarian. But I think in the simplistic mind of Donald Trump, it's so easy. It was being served on a silver platter.
Yeah. I think, it's going to be interesting seeing this evolve going forward, because once Trump announces he's officially running for president and files the paperwork, the FBI is going to have to freeze this investigation per their Justice Department policy. So, he won't be prosecuted between now and 2024.
Right.
But could this change? Could this change if he runs at all? And he might go and say, this is, I'm just not going to run because, he'll just come up with a lie to say why he's not running.
Right.
But that's a possibility. But I'm just wondering why, the best thing for him to do would be announce and file as soon as possible, so he can avoid this.
So I've heard some reports that Trump is in conversation with high-ranking members of the party, saying he wants to run, he wants to do it as soon as possible, sometime this fall. I've heard even the end of this month or September is some reporting I've seen. But some other reporting that has been out there is that top officials in the party, including House Minority Leader McCarthy, is suggesting that he wait until after the midterms, because as soon as he announces before the voting in November, you will have sort of an onslaught of just attacks from the left saying, all of these Republican candidates are just like Donald Trump. Now, in Virginia, of course, last year, that did not work. But I have a feeling, a sneaky suspicion, that if he inserts himself back into the limelight, folks are going to jump on that for the midterms, and it won't be well for the GOP.
Yeah. And a lot of these GOP candidates are looking for that Trump endorsement too. So, not all of them, but some of them are definitely trying to lean into that Trump mentality. And especially looking at this race in Wyoming this week with Liz Cheney losing for, the primary factor of, not going along with Trump's election lies and actually investigating that. So I think there's a lot of things to be said about Liz Cheney. Most of them aren't very good things, but at the end of the day, she has, found something to stand up for.
Right.
It's something that she hasn't stood up for her whole life. Her father and George Bush, in plain terms, stole the 2000 election. Of course, through more legal measures, somewhat. But today, I suppose, she sits in a different camp, and seeing how she evolves from her loss in 2024, she said, or from going on in the midterms, she said she's, her work is just getting started, and so, what do you think of this?
Wow. I'm not shocked. As I had said on the show last week, I strongly endorse Liz Cheney for her House seat in Wyoming. That's all I said. But I should say that, I'm not surprised at this. Of course, we all saw this news coming. I am someone who, aside from her whole career and aside from some of the things that she stands for and aside from who her father is, I have great respect for Liz Cheney. She, to me, is a profile in courage for the sole reason that she knew she was taking a stand that would lose her an election. And, say she's running for president or not, she's never going to win. And she can think she's going to win, she's never going to win. And she certainly won't win in Wyoming ever again. And so she decided to end her career, on a principled stand that so many in her party have been unwilling to take. And for someone like me, who's on the other side of the aisle, I view that as incredibly respectable, especially considering who she is, who her family is. She comes from the top of that party, and yet she said, screw it, and stood up for what's right, and she stood up for our democracy. And you can go back throughout her career and suggest that things that she supported are not right, and they totally aren't. She voted with Trump 93% of the time when she was in Congress. But on this crucial issue, and this is one of the big issues of our time, right? This is not just like a bill to be passed or something. I mean, this is like a generational thing. The future of our democracy itself, here is on the line. And so for Cheney, I have great respect for her. Should she run for president is a whole different question, right? In short answer, no. I think that if she runs, she will lose incredibly. But thinking about this through the lens of winning and losing, as I like to say, I think if she ran, it would be bad for Republicans, and she would split off votes from the GOP. Now, she would take some moderate Democratic votes without a doubt, because there are people out there, we know. But she would take a lot more votes from whoever gets the nomination from that party. So I think that, if she ran, it would be incredibly, it would just be huge. I mean, it's the first real three-way race since 1992.
Right. And I mean, that would be if she could gain enough traction to even, be considered. 'Cause a lot of these states have these kind of silly rules, in my view, about third parties and getting on the ballot. But,
right.
She would present an interesting challenge to whoever the Republican nominee would be. I think if it's DeSantis, she's not even going to run, because she would support DeSantis, because they agree on pretty much every single thing. And yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what she decides to do. She said yesterday morning that she was considering running for president.
I saw that interview. Yeah, it's cringe.
It's it's definitely something that's in the question, and will just be interesting to see going forward. So
right.
I mean, I don't think she's running to win. That's for sure.
I hope she's not, because here's a question for you. So if Trump runs versus Ron DeSantis, and it's just them in a primary, does Liz Cheney announce during that primary, wow, it's still a fight in the mud between DeSantis and Trump, or she waits until Trump gets the nomination? Because he 100% would win a primary against Ron DeSantis, mark my words. Here we are, summer 22. I am saying this right here for the record, that if Trump and DeSantis are in a primary, Trump will win that primary. But I sort of extended my question there, but
yeah, I mean, I don't think she. I mean, she would have to announce after the primary. Although it seems like she would run against this kind of Trump style, which is also DeSantis, what he's kind of undertaken. But I mean, like I said, if DeSantis gets the nomination, Liz Cheney has no reason for running. No. They agree on the exact same policies. They have the same platform. The only reason she would be running is to stop Donald Trump, as she said. So, I think she would have to wait until after the Republican primary.
Yep.
But with that said, I don't think the Republican primary is going to be as contentious as the media is making it. I think it's going to be, if it is Trump versus DeSantis, but
right,
it'll go to Trump. I mean,
likely. Of course, and then of course there's all these other smaller names, your Josh Hawleys, your Tom Cottons, your all these obscure people who just crave attention. But
yeah, but I mean, knowing our political landscape, it's who knows what could happen. We could be talking about a completely different.
Who knows?
Slate.
I could be so wrong, folks. I could be so wrong.
Yeah,
so we'll see.
It is 2 years away.
Right.
Alex Jones says Trump is going to be assassanated. So.
Well, he's a smart guy.
Of course,
he
said, and Biden.
Oh, really? Well, he'll be in jail, so that's great. So he can watch from jail.
So,
all right. So, anyways, we have a few Senate races on the line here, and the race for the midterms has changed incredibly from just a couple months ago. You had folks saying it was going to be a shoo-in, all the polls, having the GOP up by 5, 6, 7, even 10, 15 points in a lot of areas, and across the board nationally, it was a red wave, as they were saying. In the last couple months and weeks, we've seen that start to change, and especially in these big battleground states of Ohio and Pennsylvania, you have two big Senate races, John Fetterman, Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and just before I get into this race, I think Democrats will. I guess this is my prediction, but Democrats will win the Senate. I think they'll have a majority, whether it be one person or even a tie again. But I think they're clear to lose the House. But I think their chances are increasing day by day for 2024. So I think that'll be interesting to see how that turns out. But I think right now, as the polls are, I think it's going to be pretty favorable for Democrats, at least in the Senate, and then for the presidency in 2024. But yeah, looking at this Pennsylvania race, John Fetterman versus Dr. Oz, it's just a crazy race, and I've been watching it for years now, since Fetterman first announced. It's just two really interesting candidates and a really interesting race. Dr. Oz is just really making a fool of himself, and I think everyone sees that, including the Republican Party, who pulled back something like $7 million in their ad slots. So that's kind of a sure symbol that they don't really have faith in Dr. Oz. Fetterman has just absolutely railed against him from not actually being from Pennsylvania to Oz's kind of aristocratic, kind of just bizarre personality. Of course, you had the video from him in the grocery store this week, which was just really crazy. Yeah. But I think Fetterman, despite his health problems, which is also another interesting turn in this race, I think he will win the Pennsylvania election.
Yep.
And I think he'll go on to be a pretty good senator.
Same.
And depending on how he does in the Senate, how his health evolves and how his positions evolve, I think he'll be an interesting contender to watch going forward in, I don't think in 2024, but in 2028.
Yeah.
Could be interesting to see.
So, I actually, and I guess I hate saying this now, stand by it, but John Fetterman for me in the primary was my third choice. I supported Lamb first and foremost. I still think he's great. But John Fetterman really has proven himself over the last couple of months as being the perfect candidate for Pennsylvania, and I believe he will be a great U.S. Senator, of course, far better than Dr. Oz could be. But something else for you is that, and this is according to 538, on June 1st of this year, Dr. Oz had a 65 in 100 chance of winning this race. Now, John Fetterman has a 70 in 100 chance of winning the race. How much of a flip is that in such a short period of time? It's hard to even fathom how much this race has flipped, and I believe it is because Dr. Oz just inherently is so out of touch with Pennsylvania and the actual issues that concern folks in that Commonwealth.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a race that should be used as a model, especially Fetterman's campaign. He's extremely progressive. He runs on those issues, but he's absolutely ruthless against Oz.
Yep.
And in a state that like Pennsylvania, that's really not that progressive in terms of how they vote. They were Trump in 2016. But really, looking at their kind of the working class in Pennsylvania, they really do support these progressive issues. And I think Fetterman's style and his delivery and the way that he has branded himself is really effective. And I think it would be effective even if he wasn't up against someone as silly as Dr. Oz.
Yeah, because look, at first I was a little bit like, John Fetterman, yikes, like this guy shows up to his rallies in sweatshirts and shorts, and I'm like, he shows up to his rallies in sweatshirts and shorts, like that's great now, like this works because he is who he is and he's not pretending to be someone he's not, which is Dr. Oz's whole scam. That, he's a Pennsylvanian when he lives in Jersey, and Steve Van Zandt was on, who for years has been in Bruce Springsteen's band, who I love, by the way. But he was saying, Dr. Oz, come back to Jersey, bro. I mean, all your houses are here, your huge mansions, right? And John Fetterman, has ran, I would say so far, an A-plus campaign, especially with his health issues. He has been just so relentless online against Oz, who has no comeback because he knows it's all true and he can't defend himself. John Fetterman has lived in Pennsylvania for his whole life, and he knows the people there. And his appeal, like you said, Lincoln, especially the fact that he has a very progressive platform in a state that really isn't that progressive, but he brands it the right way. That these are issues that affect everybody, and I'm someone who's affected by these as well because this is my life. So I think right now, John Fetterman to me is a shoo-in, especially because of the fact that the GOP has scaled back its fundraising in Pennsylvania, like you said. So yeah, huge fan of John Fetterman. I think we both are. Hope he wins and wish him the best of luck. And just across the way in Ohio, we have a Senate race which is a little less close, but I think the tides are starting to turn. It's of course J.D. Vance, the Republican, who's endorsed by Trump. He's had a lead for a very long time against Tim Ryan, who I am a huge fan of. He is a congressman, ran for president in 2020. And he has an appeal similar to Fetterman in that he's for the everyman and for the working man. And I had said just before the show is that I think his strategy is great as well because he, at this point, is in a red state, right? I think Ohio, aside from Sherrod Brown, is a red state now. I hate saying it, but it is. And he actually has an ad, Ryan does, where it's just a 30-second montage of these Fox News, right? Sean Hannity, Laura Ingraham, all the hits, saying things like Tim Ryan is a true moderate or he's not a radical leftist. And of course, this has been said over the last 4 years, probably when he was running for president and got 1% in the polls, but it's come back to bite them. And he has this new ad out in Ohio. I think the polls are changing slightly, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I mean, J.D. Vance is just a really interesting, odd character as well. A lot of liberals kind of attach themselves to when he released his book, Hillbilly Elegy, and just, I think interesting to see how he has just kind of come out as just not the person that people were branding him as a few years ago, and I think it's just kind of clear that projecting this onto kind of the broader situation where this can be applied to kind of Liz Cheney too. That yes, these people are kind of putting interesting things out there or supporting interesting causes, but at the end of the day, they're going to vote with the Trumps. Right. Almost 100% of the time, they're gonna support the Republican narrative almost all the time. They are no better than Trump and the kind of radical right. They are the exact same thing. They're going to vote for them all the time. And I think people who are on the left, primarily the liberal camp, needs to stop idolizing these people.
Yeah, I mean, I think I said this on the show last week, but what is the GOP doing with these candidates? They've selected the strangest assortment of people in our country that you can find. I mean, J.D. Vance, Dr. Oz, Herschel Walker, Blake Masters in Arizona. I mean, these people are, I hate saying it, but just really odd people who I think are being used by Trump in order to further his cause. And, of course, they're ambitious. And so I think they want to run for Senate in order to make something of themselves, which is perfectly fine. But it's strange. And all four of those names that I just said are up against people, and again, I am biased, who I think just know their state, know their communities so much better than these people who weren't even born there or just aren't from the state or have some kind of shady sort of background, such as these Republican candidates running in these swing states. I mean, what the party is doing is beyond me. And something else about J.D. Vance is that he said, this was a few weeks ago, and I was astounded by this, that he thinks that women who are abused violently should stay in a marriage. I mean, this isn't like the 1940s anymore, in the 1950s. Like, I'm sorry, man, that is not appealing to really, I mean, it probably appeals to a certain group of people, a small minority, I hope, but the vast majority of us simply reject that idea. And it just shows you how strange and backwards these Republican candidates are for Senate in these swing states. And I think, if I had to put money down, I think each and every one of them, maybe J.D. Vance is going to win. Aside from that, I think each and every one of them is going to lose.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how these races turn out. And, it's August now. We still have a few months left. And so, as we know, anything could change.
Oh, yeah.
As we've experienced, these races could be totally upended, and we could see crazier things have happened.
Oh, yeah. Crazier things have happened
in this year. So, so it'll be interesting to see how all of this turns out. But yeah, that's what we've got today.
So speaking about the future, we are off to college in less than a week again for our sophomore year. Lincoln at Hofstra, me at Providence. And so essentially how this show is going to work is for the fall semester, the next couple months, we're going to do it on Zoom every other week or so. I think we both have very busy schedules at school. So we're going to find the time to have these conversations again over Zoom. And as soon as we're back in town for winter break, we're going to be doing them live, more in person again. Aside from that, we don't have a finalized schedule, but we will continue the podcast through the fall. Thank you all for listening. This is the second episode here. If you've made it this far, you've heard a great discussion between two friends about the news. And that is exactly what we want this to be. Yes, we have a little bias, but I think it's a good conversation.
And hopefully in the future we can, maybe dive more into some more specific, substantial topics rather than just doing current events and stuff. So if you're interested in that, be sure to listen on.
I think some other things we've been thinking about is diving into history, diving into basically full episodes about one issue or the other. And also something that we've been considering is doing a draft of all the presidents of the United States, similar to fantasy football. Football's starting in a couple weeks, so that was on my mind. Some great things coming up in the future. We plan to have some guests on eventually. And aside from that, we thank you so much for watching the second episode of our podcast. Stay tuned for some more great stuff ahead. Thank you.